Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. It's great to see you, and happy Labor Day weekend. It's always sad because it kind of means the end of summer, but in the year 2020 with COVID, it means the end of the year is a little closer, so hopefully we can hold on to that. I would love it if you would take a minute as you're logging on and you're watching this to comment in the comments with what are your plans tomorrow. They're probably different than any other Labor Day, but are you grilling? Are you hanging out with family? Are you wearing a mask all day with neighbors? What are you doing? We would love to know that. I don't know what our plans are other than I'm not going to work. Because that's the whole point of Labor Day, which I remember thinking when I was a kid and I would get the day off school, I'd go, why are we not laboring on Labor Day? It seems like that's what you would do, but we're taking a break. So I looked up Labor Day, and I think there are people off camera laughing at me right now because when I said laboring, it sounded like having a baby. And that would be an interesting thing to know how many babies were born on Labor Day. Somebody, you could Google that. In fact, open another window. Don't leave our window, just open another one. Google how many kids have been born on Labor Day and put that in the comments so we can learn something this morning. Speaking of learning something, I have some things to share with you about Labor Day because it's a very fascinating holiday to study. I learned, for one, that it's considered one of the big four in American holidays. There's 4 big American holidays. Are you ready? Memorial Day, 4th of July, or Independence Day, Labor Day. You know what the 4th one is? No, not Christmas. It is, but it's not official. Veterans Day. Those are the 4 American holidays. So, happy Labor Day. Here's some interesting things to know. The very first Labor Day occurred September 5th, 1882 in New York City. A lot of good things come from New York City, but not that one salsa. Do you remember that commercial? What was that salsa? Anybody? Pace? Yeah, New York City. Do you remember that one? You don't get salsa from New York City, but you did get the first Labor Day in America. Notice I said in America because you're going to learn something very interesting about the origin of Labor Day in just a minute. But the first state to make Labor Day an official holiday wasn't even New York City. Well, New York City is not a state, it's a city. But it wasn't New York State, it was Oregon. And do you say Oregon? A lot of people say Oregon. That's like people who say Illinois. It's a silent S, and I think it's Oregon. Yeah. Like Arkansas, you don't say Arkansas. I think people, if you're from Arkansas and somebody says Arkansas, they get really mad at you. Test it. Fact number 3, the holiday's origins stem to the 1800s. Get this, when the average American worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, there was like no such thing as weekends. Everybody asked the question, what is a weekend? Do you know what that's from? Anybody? Downton Abbey reference, sorry. Nobody knew, somebody got that? Nobody knew what a weekend was. And here's what's even more fascinating to me. Children ages 5 through 6 worked in factories and mines. 5 years old. That can't have been legal, even back then. Child labor laws, right? Fascinating stuff, which you'll learn that's why we got to Labor Day. But here's something interesting. I'm not a fashionista or a fashion person, but evidently it's a rule that you don't wear white after Labor Day. Do you know? Does everybody know about this? Did you know about this? If you're watching and you're feeling real sassy, get on the comments and let us know. Do you abide by that rule? Do you not wear white after Labor Day? I don't wear white ever because I instantly spill on it. Instantly. No matter what I'm eating, it ends up all over it. But here's what's interesting about this rule of no white after Labor Day. I read it was a plot by the rich people to separate themselves from the poor people. Because rich people could own both a nice white outfit for summer and a winter outfit that wasn't white and summery. So if you went to a party after Labor Day and you still were wearing white, it meant you couldn't afford another outfit. So I say let's all wear white after Labor Day. Let's all be united about that. I get a cheer. I mean, we're excited about this. I'll wear white after Labor Day. I'll only be able to wear it the one day because, like I said, I'll spill everything on it. Now, we've talked a lot about the first city was New York City, the first state was Oregon. I kind of blended them there. That was like Oregon and Gin. But here's what's interesting. Labor Day didn't even start in the United States of America. We have our neighbors to the north to thank. It actually started in Toronto, Canada, 1872. Yeah, hater. That's kind of Youper, though. Does Youper, that's more Youper. I can't do A. Yeah, I'm going to go out. See, that's very Youper. I don't have a good Canadian accent. Jim in the back, you got a Canadian accent? You can do. You're from Minnesota. I feel like you could pull it off. No, Jim's one of our techs in the back. He's from Minnesota, like I said, out loud already. Anyway. Labor Day began as a demonstration of workers' rights, but it's modernly celebrated as the last day of summer. And when Heidi and I we'd been married a few years, we moved into apartments here in Gurnee, and that's how we knew when the pool was going to close. Labor Day weekend, the pool always closed. The pool would open Memorial Day weekend. And so all the kids get really sad because when Labor Day comes, it means we're back in school. And I've talked to several people. Rumor on the street is back in the day, school didn't start till after Labor Day. I got robbed as a kid. It's still that way in Minnesota. A lot of good things come from Minnesota, Jim. Telling you. That's the way to do it, I think. Just not the, ooh. We won't say it too loud for Jim to say. We didn't say anything disparaging about the Minnesota Vikings. Nothing. Or the Twins. Anyway, people watching this are like, are they going to talk about sports? Anyway, I love sports. Cubs are doing okay. So's the other team in town. We don't name them here. At least not when I'm talking. Last thing, here's what's interesting about other countries and Labor Day, because evidently it's a worldwide phenomenon, this Labor Day thing. May 1st is the day that most will celebrate Labor Day. Most other countries do it on May 1st, and they call it May Day. What is May Day here in the United States? Isn't that a thing here too? Nobody? Crickets. It's never good when you ask a question and nobody even is trying to answer. So be a friend and comment about May Day. What is that here? Does that coincide with Earth Day or something like that? I'm drowning here. Live television. Falling apart. April 22nd is Earth Day? I feel like May Day. I do know that May 5th is my brother's birthday, Cinco de Mayo. It's pretty exciting, right? Anyway, what are your plans for Labor Day? And let us know. Again, this is kind of the conversation that we've been having for the morning. I will tell you that my personal favorite thing on Labor Day are hot dogs, because another fun fact that I learned about this weekend is that it's the end of hot dog season. Evidently, summer runs Memorial Day to Labor Day. Pool season runs Memorial Day to Labor Day, and hot dog season runs Memorial Day to Labor Day. That seems bad, right? Because I've gone to football games and they're still serving hot dogs. I think Oscar Mayer would take issue with that being a rule. So I've taken it upon myself that on Labor Day we grill hot dogs because we got to celebrate the world's weirdest food. It's such a strange food, hot dogs, isn't it? Yeah, I know. They're so good. All beef. Those are the best. Vienna beef is my personal favorite. So right now you're starting to think, maybe I want to go fire up the grill instead of watching the rest of this. Take the TV outside with you. You're probably watching us on an iPad or a phone. You can take it out there next to the grill. Just don't have it too close or you're going to have problems. We're going to get started in about 30 seconds. I'm kicking off a brand new teaching series today called Or You Could, where we're exploring how we handle ourselves as Christians in the world. If you're not a Christian and you're watching this, you still want to watch because you can go, I've seen this, and we're going to try and do better. That's going to be our goal. Joanna's going to kick us off this morning. She's got a really amazing story to share with you that for me brings a smile to my face and makes me so excited to get to be part of this community. So we'll get started in just a few seconds. Find a good cup of coffee and don't move a muscle.
Well, good morning. We are so glad that we get to spend the next 45 minutes or so with you today and hope that you are enjoying your Labor Day weekend. If it's your first time to ever check us out, we're so glad that you are here. Well, I want to share a story with you this morning, and this is just a small snippet of Bianca's story, and she graciously agreed to let us share this. So last summer, Bianca found herself just at a really low place in life. She was experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, really struggling in her marriage. So much so that she was thinking about contacting an attorney just to see what her options might be there. One day she was at work thinking about making that phone call, and something in her just said, don't do it. Don't do it. Go to church. And then a song came on the radio. And it's a song that Jason Mraz sings talking about choosing to stay in your relationship. And as you can imagine, she became pretty emotional there, started crying, and realized that she needed to make a change. And so she began coming to church, and she began reading her Bible. She would even pull up the Immanuel app and listen to past sermons and began counseling. And then in the fall of last year, found herself at a place where she was ready to take a next step. And she heard us talking about Starting Point. And Starting Point is a small group conversation about your faith. And you can be a part of that conversation no matter where you are in your faith journey. And so Bianca signed up. And I love how she describes her first meeting with her Starting Point group. She said it was a little awkward, a little uncomfortable, as you're sitting in a room of people that you've never met before. But she quickly realized that it was a safe place. It was a place where she could ask questions about her faith without judgment. And shortly into her Starting Point journey, she said all of a sudden this idea of salvation, it clicked for her. And she got it. She began to cry sitting with her group. And she describes it beautifully. She said all of a sudden, she felt very broken and yet healed all at the same moment. You see, she had always struggled with this idea of going to hell, and she had this fear that she wasn't good enough for heaven, that she wasn't Christian enough for heaven. But because she'd had space in Starting Point to ask those questions, she realized that that wasn't true. You see, environments like Starting Point, where we can meet people exactly where they are, exist because of your generosity. Bianca expressed deep gratitude to the people of Immanuel and for Starting Point because she was able to wrestle with her doubts. She realized it's okay to have questions about her faith. It's okay to have questions about her relationship with Jesus. If you're at a place where you're ready to take a next step, and maybe you think that Starting Point is that step, I would encourage you to head to our website. You can sign up for Starting Point right there, or you could sign up for another community group. Don't wait. Go ahead and do that today. And if you would like to partner with us in helping others know Jesus and grow to be like him, we'll post a link in the comments where you can do that. On behalf of Bianca and so many like her, I want to say thank you. You have made an impact in her life and her family's life because of your commitment to helping others know who Jesus is and allowing us to create environments where Jesus can move and change lives in ways that only he can. Well, Josh is going to come out in just a minute, and we're going to get started with a new teaching series he's calling Or You Could, where we're going to talk about what it means to keep the faith and keep your friends. So let's get started.
want to tell you about a magical place from my past that I lovingly refer to as Colby 19. It's the top floor of Culberson Hall at Moody Bible Institute, and it's where I spent about a semester of my life. You see, I went to Moody later in my life, and so I got paired up with all the upperclassmen, even though I wasn't an upperclassman myself. And I got to meet some of the most fascinating and great guys ever there. But they had an interesting pattern to every single week. And it culminated in the central kind of common area of Colby 19, where there was a little kitchenette and they would make ramen noodles, and there were couches that smelled like they'd been there since the school was founded, and everybody would sit around and they would get into theological debates or intense discussions about religion and what was important and what wasn't important. And they would go back and forth and draw diagrams. And as the night went on, it would get louder and louder. And eventually the night would turn into the morning. And even though I didn't usually join them and I was in my room, I could hear them all throughout. It would get heated. And everybody would get bigger and badder and scarier as they went. Because the goal had become to win the argument. Unfortunately, there were times where the next morning was the beginning of an end of a friendship because it had gotten so ugly. And for me, it was perplexing to see that these were Christian guys going to a Bible school to become pastors and missionaries and professors at other Bible schools, arguing about all that. What I learned, though, what I walked away from that scenario with was this, that some beliefs are more essential than others. Some things that fit into what it means to be a Christian, what it means to follow Jesus, what it means to go to church, and all of those kinds of things, there's an order to some of those. Now, here's what's tricky about it. Everybody you talk to is going to have a different priority list. I want to believe that some things are all going to be very similar up at the top, but as the list gets longer, they're going to get way out of order from each other. What gets sticky about that trickiness is that everybody believes their order is the right order because they grew up with a certain set of beliefs. They grew up with a certain kind of construct of how church and religion and Christianity was done, and so it's easy to fight for your list believing that it is the right one. And what's heartbreaking is that it often will end in division. You might drive down the street every once in a while and go, how do we have this many churches? And they all call themselves Christians. And they all have these weird names that we aren't all sure what they mean, but they're very important to the people that go there, and it's different than the one just down the street. And then you find out at one point they might have even known each other and been one church, but they split. And see, that's what happens. Internally, it creates division. Externally, for outsiders, they go, I don't want to have anything to do with that. They become very disinterested. So what I want to do for the next few minutes is introduce you to a concept that we talk often about in a program that we have called theopraxis. It's something we offer to our group leaders to help them explore theology at a very practical level. And in one of the sessions, they talk about the difference between the core and the periphery, or the things that are core to what we believe and things that are peripheral or not core would be the easiest way to talk about that. And I want to explain a little bit of the difference between the two and how you start to kind of decide which things go in which places, starting with the core. The core are the essential things to what we believe. The things that if you didn't believe these things, you probably aren't a Christian. If you didn't agree with these things, you probably aren't following Jesus. They're also very time-tested. They've been around for a long, long time. Some of the things that I believe have been believed for thousands of years. There's usually consensus between all of the different followers of Jesus and believing that those few central or core things are true. And they're usually easy to communicate. They're not overly complicated. You don't need a blackboard to diagram it out. It's pretty straightforward. The peripheral things, on the other hand, are a little more complex. You could go so far as to say they are non-essential. That you could meet a handful of Christians and they might see it a little bit differently. This could be things like the end times or the beginning or anything in between. They've maybe changed a little bit over time. New ways of interpreting it, which is important. These things in the peripheral, they're things that are open to interpretation, and different people see it different ways, and big, thick books take different sides. They're usually very complicated to explain. And so what we need to do is find the right balance of the core and the peripheral. What we need to do is get both things right size, because here's the danger. If we allow the core to become too big, if we start saying that everything that is Christianity and is church and all of those things are core and essential, then we run the risk of becoming very kind of fundamental, rule-following, ones that not everybody or could ever understand, let alone live out. The flip side is equally dangerous. If the core becomes too small, then everything becomes relative, and everything is open to interpretation, and we can all see it different. So striking that balance and seeing the two things is vital, because what also hangs in the balance is truth and grace. And you might sit down with a Christian, and you will know for sure that they tend to lean towards truth. Others will lean towards grace. What's so hard about following Jesus is that he struck the perfect balance between the two. And that needs to be our goal as followers of him. So our choice is, we can lean heavily on one and just decide that's what we're going to do and there's no way around it, or we could go a different route. And instead of seeing this as a problem to solve, we need to see it as a tension to manage. We talk about this all the time as a staff here at Immanuel. There are all kinds of things that feel like they're problems we need to get past and figure out and have answers for. And then there are things, more often than not, that you can't do that with. That they're going to kind of be always pulling in the opposite directions from each other, and you're going to have to stand in the middle, and you're going to have to stretch, and you're going to have to strike some balance. So what I've decided to do in my own life, and I would encourage you to do, and what we're trying to do as a community here at Immanuel, is major on majors and minor on minors. Discover what the core is and be all about it and major on those things. Stand firm in those things. But anything that is even remotely minor, be willing to have a discussion. A gentle, kind, patient discussion. And understand that in the end, you may not end up on the same side. But that doesn't mean you can't be at the same church and be a part of the same family of God following Jesus, because it's peripheral versus core. Now, I'm not making this idea up, because it would be tempting to be listening to what I'm saying and going, wow, he is about to literally jump off the deep end. For me, I'm just pulling this from a guy who has always been an example to how you do church and how you do community and how you strike this balance. I mean, Jesus was the number one example, but Paul was certainly the second. And what I don't want to do is just look at one sentence that Paul wrote thousands of years ago and go, see, there it is, because that's what we do a lot. We go, here's the one sentence, and that is what makes sense of all this. What I want to do is look at three different sentences, paragraphs really, from three different letters that Paul wrote to three different audiences, but all point at this same idea. That what's so important is we major on majors and we minor on minors. And we're going to start with the letter that he wrote to Christians in a town called Corinth. We call it 1 Corinthians. But listen to what Paul writes. He says, when I first came to you, dear brothers and sisters, I didn't use lofty words. I didn't use impressive wisdom to tell you God's secret plan. He says, for I decided that while I was with you, I would forget everything except Jesus Christ, the one who was crucified. Now think about this. Paul is not focusing so much on what. I mean, at the end, that's his conclusion. But he begins with how. How do I talk about this? I'm not going to choose lofty words, which is sometimes my temptation as a Christian, especially as a pastor. I'll refer to it tongue-in-cheek as it's like churchy language. And it feels very impressive and it feels like I get elevated a little bit. But Paul said, don't do that. And don't come with all the diagrams and all the things to impress. Focus on the one thing that matters above all things, and that's Jesus, who was crucified for you and for me to give us freedom and wholeness and forgiveness. Now, he says, I chose to forget. What's interesting about Paul saying that is he forgot more than I would ever know about the faith and about Scripture and about religion. You see, Paul was a Pharisee before he was a follower of Jesus. In fact, he was a well-respected Pharisee, and these were individuals that trained for years growing up, and then years, what we would probably call like our college age years, memorizing entire passages and books of what we now call the Bible, what they would have called the Jewish Scriptures. And Paul says, I took all of that, all that I knew, all of my degrees, all of my recognition, all of the letters after my name, and I put them aside to focus on this one thing, Jesus Christ. And so I believe what he says to me and what he says to you, what he says to all of us in our conversations with our families and our friends and our neighbors, when we're chiming in on religious discussions, dear Christian, keep it simple. Keep it simple. One of the most religiously intelligent people of all time decided he would intentionally forget to make it about the one thing. And even though it will feel like we're doing some disservice, that's the most important thing. And it's the most effective thing. Because my best laid arguments don't compare to what Jesus offers somebody. Now, Paul also wrote to some Christians in Rome, and this is what he said to them, and you'll start to hear the pattern. He says, watch out for people who cause divisions and upset people's faith. And I want to pause right there because these people, you need to have some understanding of who he's warning them about. Because what he's going to talk about is the idea of division and contrary. But the people are what would have often been referred to by most circles as Judaizers. They were Jewish people that had kind of become Christians, and what they were insisting was to become a Christian, you had to also become a Jew, and you had to go through all of the things and the rituals and know all of the rules as a Jew in order to become a Christian, because Jesus was a Jew and he was the fulfillment of the promise of the Messiah, and it just felt to them like that was necessary. And so what they would do is they would take that simple thing that Paul talked about with the church in Corinth, and they would add to it, and they would compound it and make it more complicated. And he says, you need to watch out for them because they're going to upset people's faith, and they're going to teach things contrary to what you have been taught. Stay away from them. Such people are not serving Christ, our Lord. They are serving their own personal interests. I know for me, in the times where I get into the thick of some deep theological debate, I'm starting to serve my personal interests. I want to win. I want to prove that I'm smart. I want to prove that I'm righteous. I want to prove that I know Jesus and I know God and I know the Bible. And I'm getting away from the interests of Jesus, which would be their heart and their mind being renewed and transformed, and them growing closer to him. Now here's what's so complicated about what Paul's saying. He says, they're going to teach you things that are contrary. And people that were paying attention would have gone, contrary? I mean, they're all about Jesus too. They'll talk about Jesus, but what Paul's pointing at is what they're doing is they're inverting it, and they're making the peripheral things the core things. And they're letting the core become very broad, and all of a sudden it's very rule heavy. It's very right and wrong, and it's very in or out and absolute. And Paul says, don't get that twisted. What you need to do is keep it simple and keep it central. And the it here is the cross of Jesus. You keep Jesus at the center of everything that you're talking about. and you keep the gospel and his mission at the core of everything that you talk about, you always, always, always come back to that. And so for me, when I have a discussion with somebody that's like, yeah, I don't talk a whole lot about my faith because I'm afraid they're going to ask questions that I don't know the answers to. Or they're going to have some defense of their worldview that's different than mine, and it's going to really trip me up. And just come back to Jesus. Just come back to the central message that Paul would always bring it back to. He was a master at it. There's this one time where he's in this place that we will refer to now as Mars Hill, and he goes into this area where there's a bunch of idols around, and they're named for all the different gods that they would worship, and they had one that was to an unknown God, and this is how good Paul was at it. He would say, this unknown God. He didn't even go about slamming their other idols. He just said, this unknown God, I know this God. His name's Jesus, and I'd love to tell you about him. He always kept the central thing, and he didn't allow all of the other stuff to invade that space. One more letter. This time, to his young friend named Titus. He says, listen, do not get involved in foolish discussions about spiritual pedigrees or in quarrels and fights about obedience to Jewish laws. And get what he says next. This is so powerful. These things are useless and a waste of time. If you want to get into all those debates, just know you are totally missing it. That's not the point. That's not why you're here. That's not, Titus, why you've been given the position in the church that you've been given. It's not to win debates. It's not to win arguments. It's not to make a point. It's to make a difference. And what they would do back then, which hasn't changed much in the church world, spiritual pedigrees like, tell me about my family and the schools that I've gone to, or the studies that I've done, or the books that I've read, or the YouTube videos I've watched, and all the rules and regulations. And he says, listen, don't even dip your toe in those kinds of things. Move on. There's far more important things to worry about. But here's the thing that he doesn't mention explicitly, but I find so fascinating and honestly witnessed over the years. The arguments don't usually happen over Jesus because everybody agrees. Even people who don't necessarily believe that he's the Son of God yet, they don't usually have a problem with him. So why not just keep the discussion at him? Let's worry about who he is and what he said, and we're not going to move on until we figure that out. Because once we get past that, once we get beyond that, once we start getting out into the peripheral stuff, it's so easy to lose sight of the central thing. And Paul is so concerned with unity. And he points out at the beginning, don't get into arguments. Don't get into these divisive things that are going to pull people apart. Relationally, the church needs to be united, needs to be one, needs to stand together. You'll see this over and over again in his writings. So he would say, lastly, make sure that you keep it civil. When you get into these debates, whether that's in your community group, in the break room at work, the lunch table at school, the Thanksgiving table with your family, keep it civil. Because the goal is to be united around the central, core, simple truth of Jesus. And how we go about that is so important, because how will get in the way of what? So, major on majors, minor on minors. Every time I hear the word major or minor, I go way back to my childhood with my piano teacher. I took piano for a little while, and I learned that there were major chords and minor chords, and they sound really different. I don't know how to explain it as well as my piano teacher. So we're going to take a little journey over to my mom's house, and she's going to tell you all about it. So I'm here at my mom's house, and we're in the living room. This is where she taught me how to play piano, and it's something I wish I would have stuck with.
Me too.
I know, and I know I could have stuck with it. But part of what you taught me were the difference in major chords and minor chords. And so in this talk that we're having this morning, I'm talking about majors and minors. Now we need to major on the majors. So when it comes to music, can you give us a taste of the difference between a major chord and a minor chord, and then explain what makes them different?
Sure. Okay, the major chords are brighter, happier. And then the minor chords are more soulful.
They almost sound sadder to me.
Much. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, or like heavier feeling, right? So what made those sound so different? Because I think to the average person it might sound like you played something entirely different, but there's not a whole lot of
It was
change.
actually one note.
Just one.
Different.
So you're making a note go, what would that be, like flat or sharp?
To make it major, you're going sharping it, and to make it minor, you're flatting it.
So the difference between a major and a minor is not that much.
No?
Right? And so I think when we're talking about theology and things, the difference between the core of what we believe and some of the peripheral things we believe, it can be hard to tell the difference sometimes. So like a D major. Now a D minor as well. So there's one note that changed. Can you show me on there where that note has
Sure,
changed?
it's the middle note.
So
here is minor.
Okay.
Here is major.
So it's really just, that's the difference, that subtle of a difference. Which is interesting because I've always believed, like, again, with our theology, it's so easy for us to switch things around and make some things more important than others. And I just think that's a really fascinating comparison when you think about music, because they sound so different and feel so different.
Really do.
But it's just the one note. Do you, I know we don't agree on this, and it's fine that we don't agree on this, that the major chords tend to be more attractive?
I think
people?
it depends on your mood.
Yeah,
I
so
really
that's
do.
interesting, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're sad, you might be drawn to a minor chord.
Oh, yes.
It kind of depends on where you're at in life, which says something about sometimes when it comes to God and what we believe, we're gonna focus on some things more than others depending on where we're at. So it's not that a minor chord is bad.
No.
In fact, you would say most of the music you love. Who's your favorite composer? Chopin, and he does a lot of minor, right? So one note difference. That doesn't mean it's not important. It means that they're both really important. They're just different. And is it true that most of the songs we sing, or a lot of the songs we sing at church, are in major chords?
Yeah, they're happier.
Yeah, which is good when
If
you've had a
you're a
long week.
hymn girl like me, there are a lot of happy, really singing fast hymns.
Well, I'm a hymn boy because you've taught me all the hymns. Right? So if you were going to guess a percentage of like what the average person listens to, what percentage do you think is in a major key?
Well, I think if they listen to classical music, there's a great deal of classical music that's minor. But today's music, I'm not really into today's music. So I'm not really sure about that. I listen to a very wide variety.
Is one easier to play than the other? On the piano, for instance?
Almost for expression, the minors are easier to play.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Because they just like get in your heart and your soul and...
Yeah. So will you play something for us?
I'd love to.
Is it going to be in a major or a minor?
Major.
Major. Here we go. Thanks, Mom. You can hear it in the music, can't you? When you hear that major chord, it feels familiar, you're drawn into it, it's bright, it's cheerful. And the minor one is something else. And what I don't want you to think, what I don't want you to walk away misinterpreting here, I'm not saying that the peripheral isn't important. Just like I'm not saying there isn't great music with minor chords. In fact, I prefer minor chords. But when it comes to making a difference in someone else's life, drawing people towards Jesus, let's focus on the major things. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. Before you get into any kind of discussion, filter before you fight. Filter before you fight. And the filter you have to use is the core. Is this central? Is this the most important thing? Has this stood the test of time? Does everyone agree on this? If the answer is yes, then let's talk about it. But if it's not yes, then we're going to take a step back and take a deep breath and be willing to have a gentle, kind conversation about it. And make it our goal to keep the friendship and not sacrifice it on the altar of winning a fight. So ask yourself this question then, what's the point? What's the point of this discussion? If my point is I want to win, I want to look good, then you're in the wrong fight. If the goal here is I want to share the heart of Jesus with someone, I want them to understand fully and with clarity who he is and what he's done for them and what he offers them, then by all means, dig in your heels and have that conversation. It always brings me back. Anytime I go down this train of thought, it always brings me back to St. Augustine or Augustine, depending on how you pronounce it, where he said these words. I love this quote. He said, in the essentials, unity. In all else, charity. So ask yourself, when you insert your thoughts into the discussion in person or online, and you see that those things are not core, they're more peripheral, are you being charitable? Are you being kind and patient? If not, it's maybe time to find a different discussion. It's maybe time to bring it back to the core central truth of what it is that we believe. Because I agree wholeheartedly with St. Augustine. I just say it different. Major on majors, minor on minors. Because the truth is, Jesus is the most fascinating, the most captivating, the most amazing promise and gift and truth that anyone has ever heard. Because he's God himself. And he loves you so deeply. And he loves the person you're talking to as well. So, you could focus on the peripheral. You could focus on winning the argument. Or you could go a different route. And maybe, just maybe, see a life changed forever. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, it's so difficult to stay focused. It's so difficult to not get lost in all of the other things that surround the gospel, that surround the good news that you have given us. The good news that you are. And God, I kind of tremble at the thought of how many times I've allowed it to get away from that simple, central, good promise for the sake of looking smart, for the sake of looking holier than thou, for the sake of looking Christian. And in the process, not being a little Christ. So what I'm asking you for today, what I'm asking you for on behalf of my friends that are watching today, that you would help us to know what are the essential things, that you would give us the courage and the strength to focus on those and to share those indiscriminately with everyone that we meet. Because God, we truly believe that you are exactly who you say you are. Don't let us get in the way of others knowing that. Amen.
We're heaven's small creations, His pride and adoration, treasures woven by His love. His careful hands, they hold us safe within His promise of calling and of destiny. We're heaven's sworn creations, His bride.
side. There won't be a day that you let me fall. In all of my life, your love will be true. With all of our lives, we will worship you.
Jesus, the thing that drives me to my knees to sing those words with all of my life, I will worship you, is when I lock my thoughts and my heart on you and the cross and the empty tomb and the reality that you love me that much. So keep our minds and hearts focused there every day, all day, as we go forward. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for joining us on this Labor Day weekend. I'm sure you have a bazillion things to do or other things that you could have done during this time. So we really do consider it an honor to have joined you in your home. Thanks for letting us do that. We hope that you'll stay in touch all week long. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. We'll be sure to reach out really, really soon. In the meantime, I hope you'll put it on your calendar to be back here next Sunday, same time, same place, as we continue this series, or you could. Have a great Labor Day. And make sure at 1 o'clock you join on and get a seat here and be with us live. We'll see you then. Bye, everybody.